Detective Scott Ernstes, S-C-O-T-T, last is E-R-N-S-T-E-S. And just go?
Just go. Give
Okay.
us the update.
So we already put out the information that we are investigating the death of Marcia Bateman. This story began back in 1988, October 12th, when a skeleton was found out by Covert, Michigan, by I-196 and County Road 378. Since that time, the Michigan State Police have used all kinds of means to try to identify her, and up until recently, we had not been able to identify her. So earlier this year, in 2019, we were able to get a grant from a local business, Kalamazoo Mortgage, to pay for genealogy testing. Through genealogy testing, we were able to identify I-196 Jane, as she had come to known, as Marcia Bateman, Marcia Kaling Bateman, out of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Today, what we're talking to you about is we're looking for any investigative means possible to figure out how Marcia made it from Oklahoma to Michigan. We learned through talking to family members that she was reported missing in August of 1988. They believe she was last seen around that same time. There's some confusion as to exactly when. And we also know that prior to being reported missing, it's possible that she traveled to Los Angeles to see family and or Dallas to see family. So we're asking for anyone that has information on Marcia. We have some photographs of her, and we'll also give those to everyone so you can use them in your broadcast. We're asking if you knew her in any way, because we would love to find that family member or friend that maybe was a friend of hers that can lead us to who actually picked her up. She did not have a vehicle, didn't have a means to get to Michigan, and she was known to hitchhike, etc., but her main use of travel back then was catching rides. So if you knew Marcia back then, or she looks familiar in any way, we're asked that you contact us. We are also asking if you have at any time from 1988, specifically between August and October, if you were out in the area of I-196 and County Road 378 by Covert and you saw something suspicious, give us a call. You never know what small little detail could actually help us solve this. The other thing is with the proximity of the Covert campground as well as the South Haven State Park to where she was found in that area, we're asking if you were camping during that time frame out there and maybe something struck you as odd, maybe you saw her, or maybe you saw a woman similar to her that looked out of place, something like that, or anybody that might have been there, just give us a call. We've set up a tip line, both email and phone, that you can call and reach out to us. If it is something you don't want your information known, you can also leave an anonymous tip, but we would prefer you not, so we can call you back and get as much detail as possible. So again, this main purpose of today is we're really trying to find out how Marcia made it to Michigan and find anybody that may have known her back in the day. That's our primary focus, so we can continue the next phase of this investigation. Any questions?
Can you first, just before I forget to even ask this, spell Marcia's name?
M-A-R-C-I-A, K-Lynn, K-A-Y-L-Y-N-N, Bateman, B-A-T-E-M-A-N, and she a lot of times went by Marcia K.
Do we know a cause of death at this time?
That's not something we're able to release.
Is it being considered a murder?
At this point, it's considered a suspicious death. It's basically, we're calling it a death investigation. We do have means to believe, based on the totality of everything, that it's definitely suspicious and there was something that happened, but we're not at liberty to release that information yet.
Any suspects?
At this point, we do not have any suspects.
Where exactly was she found? I looked at the intersection on the map of the two highways, CRs 378 and 196. Where exactly was she found in that grid?
We're not at liberty to actually give you the exact location of where she was found, because again, we want to make sure we have some information back in case someone comes forward. But she was found right near that intersection, one of the wooded areas.
And you said that she was known to hitchhike?
Yes, she was actually known to hitchhike, and all due respect to the family, I have spoken to them several times. They do know that she did have association to prostitute, and she was a drug user as well, so that put her in contact with a lot of people that could potentially have caused something ill happen to her.
But could you say something, I mean, people might listen, hear that and think maybe ill of her in this investigation. Why is that necessarily not the focus here today?
The focus today, we're at the infancy. So whenever you start an investigation, you start with trying to figure out basically what's called a victimology. You work through who the victim is. Well, for the past 30-some years, they didn't know who the victim was, so we couldn't even start at square one. So now that we know who she is, that's where we're going to start, is who knew the victim, who she was hanging around, what she was up to, and that a lot of times leads us to what happened to her. So we're still at the very beginning now, if you will, now that she's been identified, of the investigation.
How crucial is the DNA? I mean, it sounds like they're huge breakthrough being able to do this.
So I will say forensic genealogy, or the DNA genealogy thing, is going to be a game changer for law enforcement. It's already started, and if I can put a plug out there to anyone that signs up for these things, please check opt-in every time you put your thing in. If you mark on there opt-in for law enforcement, it gives us access to yours, and we could find your loved one, you know. So it's huge. It's going to be the newest thing in law enforcement in the future.
Do you expect some more, cases to be identified? I know there's several in the area.
Yeah, so on that note, graciously by Kalamazoo Mortgage, they paid for the first one to kind of give us proof of concept, if you will. And now because of that, we've been able to, we got funding through the state police. They've set aside money to do all 6 additional unidentified persons in the district. So we have 6 in our district that are just state police cases, and they're going to do all 6 this year. So hopefully we'll have 6 more people that have never been identified that we can find their family.
Can you name those? Do you know?
Right off the top of my head, I can't, but they're all on NamUs, and they're all in there. I can get you a list after this.
Did she have any ties in the Michigan area at all that you know of?
That is where we're at right now. As of now, none. We've talked to family, and we've talked to some extended family, and we don't see that she had any ties to Michigan or even the surrounding states. We were essentially told by family, typically she stayed in Oklahoma, Dallas, Los Angeles. Those 3 areas is where she would kind of go back and forth. She did have an apartment and a home that she lived in. She lived by herself, we know that, and that's kind of where we're at. So again, we're at the very beginning of this.
Any mental health challenges that you know of?
The family said there may have been mental health challenges. It wasn't something they went into great detail about, but she had kind of a difficult life. But she did have a mother that regularly contacted her and stayed in contact. Unfortunately, her mother has since passed.
How challenging is it going to be? You're starting, part of the process decades later. Does that pose some unique challenges?
Anytime you deal with a situation where there's time, it can be a hindrance. It can also be play in your favor. So a lot of times, I always put it like this: over the years, people's allegiances they change. So you may not have talked to the police back in 1988 because you were in the drug trade or whatever, but now you might be out of it, or you have a family now. So it can be a hindrance and a help. In this case, I think we're optimistic. It's just a matter of, we've got some great partners down in Oklahoma City that are actually going to help us through their police department. And so the difficulty in this is the distance, because I can't run right out and talk to a witness. I'm having to coordinate, and my partner's having to coordinate with Oklahoma City and Dallas and different places when we get tips.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out there. Dennis Bowman was arrested Friday for a murder in Norfolk. However, when we went up there, we thought it had to do with the missing adopted daughter of his, who disappeared around the same time as this woman. Is there any reason to believe he might be connected to this, or they might have known each other?
At this point, no. It appears based on records. I mean, we're not ruling anything out, but at this point, there is absolutely no tie between Dennis Bowman and this case. And it looks like we have to confirm some times he was in jail, but it looks like it's not related at this time.
Can you talk about the campground area back then, that was like?
Sure. Well, we talked to some people, and they were both around. So there's the Covert Campground, which is kind of a locally owned, but it's straight down 378, and it was widely used, as was the South Haven State Park. So the thought is that brings a lot of people into the area and out of the area, not necessarily her or a suspect, but it's just more eyes that were in the area for an extended period of time. They might have been there a week, maybe they saw something. That's why we're specifically saying that's kind of the biggest draw of people right in that area where she was found.
She wasn't found at either of those locations?
Absolutely not. Nope, she was actually found out closer to the freeway. So right off the freeway there.
Off 196?
Mhm.
Okay.
She went missing. Obviously, it was reported down in Oklahoma City, and you had some unidentifiable remains here. Had Oklahoma City ever reached out to you before asking, hey, maybe this is Marcia?
No, not up until then. In review of the Oklahoma City missing persons case, it appears that they took the missing person investigation. They did quite a bit of work looking for her, and then at some point it went dormant. And again, this is way before the big communications, and then she didn't get entered into NCIC again. So there was no direct connection, and because her mother and father and other family members had passed, there was no DNA in NamUs. So it basically, without the genealogy, I would say without a doubt she would have never been identified.
What family members are still alive in her immediate family?
They don't want to be contacted, but it's an aunt and several cousins. So, and they are helping us along the way, and they're very thankful for this. And I did say that if you send me an email, I'll give you my email, and you want to reach out to them, I won't give you their information, but I always pass it along. I had someone from Oklahoma City ask, and if they decide they want to talk, they will call you and let you know. And they may in the future. I told them it could be helpful. So,
Were they, what was their reaction when they heard that, she had been identified?
First we talked to the aunt, and she was very, very thankful and somewhat overwhelmed by the fact that her sister never got the opportunity to know this. She said it was really hard on her sister for many years, always wondering what happened to him. And as an investigator, Chris and I will both tell you that there are a lot of things that can happen to you, but not knowing what happened to a loved one is probably the worst. It's harder than knowing they were killed in a crash or they died or whatever than just never knowing. That's what most everybody we talk to about these sort of cases say.
How did you guys get tied into the mortgage company? Because they were the ones that paid for...
Yes.
Yeah, so how did that even come about?
So I have had a long relationship with one of the other managing partners, Brian Metner, and he supports one of the nonprofits that we have through the state police when we help kids like Shop with a Cop and different things. And so when it came time, we were trying to find the funding, and it's at the end of the year, budgets are tight, and so I thought, I just asked him, I said, is there anything, do you have anything there? And overwhelmingly he said, absolutely, let's do this, she deserves it. And that's what, Ryan and Brian both told me, and so they paid for the first one and got us rolling, and huge success.
When was
that? That was in late 2018, I have the exact date when we did it, but in late 2018 is when we kind of started that process and got it all submitted, sent a bone down, and then once we got the results back, it was only about 5 weeks before the DNA Doe Project was able to give us an ID.
How much something like that costs?
It was about $1,850, and the prices are actually going down a little bit, but it's kind of a dual step thing. The first thing is to get your sample into a usable form, so you take the bone and you get it put into a usable form to put it into the system. But that's only the first part, because then that gives you a list of 6,000 second to fourth relatives, cousins. Then you have to do all the genealogy research, and that's the really expensive part, and that can cost several $1,000s. We are lucky with all unidentifieds. The DNA Doe Project is willing to do that for free. They're a nonprofit, and they did all the genealogy research for us, and we're able to come up with this is her, and then we confirmed that through DNA.
When exactly did you find out that this was her?
So we found out in August 2019 that it was likely Marcia Bateman, and then we were able to confirm that earlier this month that by DNA that yes, for sure it is her.
So you did, in addition to that first confirmation using that genealogy DNA, you also did your own separate...
Absolutely. You always want to confirm it in a second way, either dental or whatever, and in this case DNA was the only way to do it because we didn't have prints and there were no old dental records on file.
So she's not a resident of Michigan. What does it mean to you all just investigating this so you can at least help answer some questions so far?
It's big for not just their family but also investigators. I know when I became a detective at the Post, we have all our cases, and the unidentified cases have always struck me hard, because I'll pull those out and I'll read it from 1988 and what was missed, because it's hard to believe that somebody goes missing and there's no one that is calling every day everywhere saying, hey, I heard you found somebody. And unfortunately, it was at a time when there just wasn't DNA and things like that. So it's a big deal that we were able to actually identify her, but then, like I said, we're on to the next stage of the investigation, try to figure out what happened.
So the biggest thing at that time, like what were some of the hiccups in the case that made it be so cold for so long?
There wasn't really a hiccup, was I think the distance. Because obviously I looked at the investigation and there were a lot of, back then, like teletypes or whatever, messages sent all over the United States anytime a new unidentified came up. But I think with the distance, Oklahoma wasn't reaching out up here, and we weren't reaching out down there, but they did send some down to Texas. I saw that investigators from the Michigan State Police sent a request to Texas and things like that. So you got to think, before the internet, unless a notification was seen on the news by a detective or it was sent to the state police, we never knew that a body was found or this girl's missing. That's one good thing about the internet and the future of that.
How long, from what you know, how long did it seem like she had been there before she was discovered?
A couple of months. So, I mean, it fits with the timeline of her going missing around August or shortly before and being found in October. So, and it fits based on the estimates that were given by the pathologist.